Imagine spending 30 years building an empire from nothing. Imagine starting with $12 in your pocket, sleeping in your car, working 18-hour days, and slowly, painfully, turning that struggle into a business worth over $4 billion. Now imagine the one person you trusted more than anyone else in the world, your own wife, was secretly planning to take it all away from you. Not a stranger. Not a business rival. Not a hacker or a thief in the night. Her. The woman who wore his ring. The woman who sat beside him at every dinner, every award ceremony, every quiet night at home. The woman who whispered, "I love you," while behind closed doors she was moving his money into accounts he didn't know existed. This is the story of Richard Hale, a self-made American billionaire, and the betrayal that almost cost him everything he had ever built. Stay with me until the end, because the twist in this story is something you will not see coming. And if you enjoy real, powerful stories like this one, make sure to subscribe, because we share a new story just like it every single week. Let's begin. Richard Hale was born in a small town in Ohio, in a house with thin walls and a leaking roof. His father worked at a factory. His mother cleaned houses for extra money. There was no inheritance waiting for him. No family business. No shortcuts. What Richard did have was a hunger. A deep, burning hunger to build something that no one could ever take away from him. At 19, he dropped out of college with $300 in savings and a plan that most people laughed at. A small logistics company that helped local businesses move goods faster and cheaper than the big national carriers. For the first 5 years, it barely survived. He worked from a garage. He drove the trucks himself. He slept 4 hours a night. There were months he couldn't pay himself a single dollar. But slowly it grew. One truck became 5. 5 became 50. By the time he was 35, Richard Hale's logistics company had expanded into warehousing, then real estate, then technology. He was no longer just a businessman. He was building an empire. It was during this rise, at a charity gala in Chicago, that he met Vanessa. Vanessa was elegant, sharp, and confident. She wasn't intimidated by his success, she matched it with her own presence. She asked him questions no one else dared to ask. She challenged his opinions instead of simply agreeing with him. For a man surrounded by people who only ever told him, yes, Vanessa felt different. She felt real. They married 2 years later, in a quiet ceremony that Richard insisted on keeping small, despite his growing wealth. He wanted a partner, not a spectacle. For the next several years, life seemed close to perfect. 2 children. A beautiful home. A wife who stood beside him at every major business decision. To the outside world, Richard Hale had it all: the money, the family, the love. But underneath that picture-perfect surface, small cracks had already begun to form. Cracks that Richard, blinded by love and trust, refused to see. Looking back, Richard would later admit there were signs. Small ones. Easy to miss when you're in love. Easy to explain away when you trust someone completely. It started with little things. Vanessa began taking more interest in the company's financial structure, not the products, not the mission, but specifically the accounts, the shareholdings, the legal ownership documents. At first, Richard was proud. He thought his wife simply wanted to understand his world better. He began sharing more with her: passwords, access to certain financial statements, even introducing her to his closest financial advisor, a man named Gregory Voss. Gregory Voss had been with Richard since the early days. He was one of the few people who had seen the business grow from a single truck to a multi-billion-dollar operation. Richard trusted him completely. What Richard didn't know was that Vanessa and Gregory had started meeting outside of work. At first, it was framed as just business, reviewing documents, discussing investment strategies. To surprise Richard with good news. But slowly, those meetings became something else entirely. Meanwhile, Vanessa's behavior at home began to shift, though so gradually that Richard barely noticed. She became more distant during family dinners. She started taking business trips alone, always with a reasonable explanation. She began asking Richard to sign documents. Quickly, always during his busiest, most exhausted hours, always framed as routine paperwork. Richard trusted her. Why wouldn't he? She was his wife, the mother of his children, the woman who had stood beside him through late nights and difficult decisions for over a decade. He signed without reading every line. He never imagined that trust could be the very weapon used against him. Here is where the story becomes something much darker. Over 18 months, Vanessa and Gregory Voss slowly restructured pieces of Richard's business empire, not through theft in the traditional sense, but through legal manipulation. Shell companies, reassigned shareholdings, documents that moved ownership percentages by small, almost invisible amounts. Each individual document looked harmless. A routine adjustment here, a standard restructuring there. But when combined together, over time, they formed a pattern, a slow, deliberate transfer of control away from Richard and into accounts and entities that Vanessa and Gregory quietly controlled. It was, in essence, a corporate heist, except the target wasn't a stranger's company. It was the empire Richard Hale had built with his own hands, his own sacrifice, his own 30 years of struggle. Why would Vanessa do this? Later, when the truth came out, investigators found something that shocked everyone close to the family. Vanessa and Gregory Voss's relationship had gone far beyond business. It had become personal, an affair that had started nearly 2 years earlier, hidden behind late-night meetings and business trips. The plan, as investigators pieced it together, was simple in its cruelty. Once enough of the company's control had been quietly shifted, Vanessa intended to file for divorce. But not a normal divorce. A divorce timed perfectly, using manipulated financial documents to claim the majority of Richard's empire as her own, while Gregory Voss would already control key operational levers of the business from the inside. Richard Hale, the man who built everything from $12 and a dream, would be left with a fraction of what he had spent his life creating. And the woman he trusted most was the one holding the knife. It was a small mistake that unraveled everything. Late one night, unable to sleep, Richard opened his laptop to review a report before an early morning meeting. He noticed a folder he didn't recognize, one that Vanessa had accidentally left open on their shared home network drive. Inside were documents. Dozens of them. Legal filings. Shareholder restructuring papers. Emails between Vanessa and Gregory Voss that were not about business at all. Richard read through the night. Each document felt like a small betrayal. Together they formed a picture too painful to accept, his wife and his most trusted advisor, working together, quietly dismantling everything he had built. He didn't confront her immediately. Instead, Richard did something few people in his position would have the discipline to do. He stayed calm. He hired an independent forensic accounting team, separate from his usual company staff, working entirely in secret. He hired a lawyer who had no prior connection to Gregory Voss or anyone in his inner financial circle. For nearly 3 weeks, Richard continued living his normal life, attending meetings, having dinner with Vanessa, tucking his children into bed, all while quietly gathering evidence of exactly how deep the betrayal went. It was, by his own later admission, the hardest 3 weeks of his life. Not because of the business risk, but because every smile Vanessa gave him at the dinner table now felt like a performance. Every "I love you" felt hollow. But Richard needed proof. Solid, undeniable proof. Because he knew that if he moved too early, without full evidence, Vanessa and Gregory could simply cover their tracks, and he would lose not just his company, but any chance of protecting it for his children's future. Once the forensic team confirmed the full scope of the manipulation, the shell companies, the reassigned shareholdings, the pattern of quietly shifted ownership, Richard made his move. He didn't scream. He didn't confront Vanessa in anger. Instead, in complete silence, he executed a plan of his own. First, he used emergency governance powers written into the company's original founding charter, powers that, as the founder, only he could invoke, to freeze all recent shareholding changes pending a full audit. Second, he legally removed Gregory Voss from any financial authority within the company, citing breach of fiduciary duty, backed by the evidence his forensic team had compiled. Third, and most difficult of all, he met with Vanessa, not with accusations, but with documents laid calmly on the table between them. Investigators later described Vanessa's reaction as a mixture of shock and desperation. She had believed the changes were slow and careful enough to avoid detection. She had underestimated the very man she married, a man who had built an empire by noticing details others missed. The legal battle that followed lasted over a year. Vanessa's team argued that the transferred shares were legitimate gifts and business decisions made jointly. Richard's team presented the forensic evidence, the pattern of manipulation, and the communications between Vanessa and Gregory that revealed the true intent behind the transfers. In the end, the court ruled overwhelmingly in Richard's favor. The fraudulent transfers were reversed. Gregory Voss faced serious legal and financial consequences for breach of fiduciary duty. Vanessa, in the divorce settlement that followed, received a fair and legally standard division of marital assets, but nothing close to the empire she and Gregory had tried to seize. Winning the legal battle didn't undo the emotional damage. Richard Hale later spoke about how the betrayal changed him, not by making him bitter, but by making him wiser. He described the experience as losing a version of trust he could never fully get back, but gaining a clarity about what truly mattered. He rebuilt his personal life slowly. He focused on his relationship with his children, making sure they understood that what happened between their parents was not their fault. He restructured his company with stronger, more transparent governance systems, not out of paranoia, but out of hard-earned wisdom. He often repeated one lesson to young entrepreneurs who asked him for advice. Build your empire carefully, but guard your trust even more carefully. Money can be rebuilt. Trust, once broken at that level, changes you forever. Richard didn't become cold or closed off. In fact, those who worked with him afterward described him as more empathetic, more attentive to the people around him, because he now understood, in the deepest way possible, how easily appearances can hide someone's true intentions. He continued growing his business, eventually expanding into new markets, mentoring young founders, and quietly funding scholarships for first-generation entrepreneurs from small towns just like the one he grew up in. The betrayal that almost destroyed him instead became the foundation of a quieter, stronger version of the man he had always tried to be. Richard Hale's story is not just about a billionaire and a betrayal. It's about something every single person watching this video can relate to, no matter how much or how little money they have. Trust is easy to give and incredibly hard to protect. The people closest to us have the greatest power to hurt us, not because they are naturally cruel, but because we lower our guard completely around them. Richard's story teaches us three powerful lessons. First, success does not protect you from betrayal. In fact, greater success often attracts people who see you not as a person, but as an opportunity. Second, calm, careful action beats emotional reaction. Richard didn't destroy himself with anger. He gathered proof, moved with discipline, and protected what mattered most. Third, real strength isn't about never being hurt. It's about how you rebuild after you are. Richard Hale lost a marriage, but he didn't lose himself. And in the end, that made all the difference. So, to sum it all up, this was the story of a man who built an empire from nothing, trusted the person closest to him with everything he had, and faced the ultimate betrayal from his own wife. But instead of being destroyed by it, he used calm thinking, patience, and quiet strength to protect everything he had built, and came out the other side wiser, stronger, and more grounded than before. The lesson here is simple: protect what you build, stay alert even with those you love the most, and never let betrayal turn you bitter. Let it make you wiser instead. If this story touched you, moved you, or taught you something valuable today, do us a huge favor. Hit that subscribe button and turn on notifications. because we bring you a brand new powerful story just like this one every single week. Drop a comment below and tell us, what would you have done in Richard's position? Thank you for watching until the very end. We'll see you in the next story.